Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Candidates Forum for Select Board. of 2023. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Just a few moments. My name is Mark Garrett. I am one of the producers on Wake Up in Provincetown. I want to give a big thank you to, thank you. I want to give a big thank you to the folks here at the Crown and Anchor for providing this space in the middle of their renovations. I want to thank the Provincetown Independent for conceiving this forum. They thought it was an important thing to do, and I want to thank them for inviting Wake Up team to come along with them on this little journey this evening. And also thanks to the technical people at Wake Up in Provincetown and Live from Provincetown, providing the live stream services for people watching on YouTube or on Facebook. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Harrison Fish, who is one of the co-hosts of Wake Up in Provincetown, and he's going to act as your moderator this evening.
Thank you, Mark. Again, thank you all for coming out this evening for the Candidates Forum, and thank you to all the candidates for being so willing to get up on stage. I know that can be a rather daunting task. And also thank you to everyone who Mark also thanked. It's easiest that way. I want to introduce our moderators first. We have Amelia Roth-Dishy. If you want to tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Amelia. I'm the Community Reporting Fellow for the Provincetown Independent. New to town, started here in January, and since then I've been covering a lot of Provincetown civics, including town meeting and some of the candidates. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Amelia. Paul Benson.
Hi, I'm Paul Benson, a senior reporter at the Provincetown Independent. I moved here 10 years ago, have worked at restaurants and sailboats and dune tours all over town, and started writing for the newspaper in 2019. I also mostly cover the Select Board, Housing, and Civics.
Thanks, Paul Benson. And my name is Harrison Fish. I'm one of the hosts of Wake Up in Provincetown, which is a morning talk-style community-based YouTube program. It airs every Friday morning. You can check that out. In addition to tonight's forum, if you want to learn even more about the candidates, the Provincetown Independent published 4 articles this morning on each of the candidates, as well as Wake Up in Provincetown over the past month has featured each of the candidates individually for a short interview. So check all that out in addition to tonight. In addition to our live audience we have here, we also have viewers on YouTube and Facebook that are watching live. And if any of y'all want to rewatch, you can also rewatch either of those programs, either through YouTube or Facebook. It's on Wake Up in Provincetown's YouTube and Facebook page. Okay, so let's talk a little about the forum tonight. We have our 4 candidates. We're going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves momentarily, and then we've between the 3 of us, the Wake Up and the Independent staff, we've written questions for the candidates. They're each going to have 90 seconds to answer each question. We've randomized orders for each question, so it'll be a different order to be fair throughout. We don't expect there to be any need for a rebuttal, but the moderators, me and my other 2 moderators, will decide if someone specifically gets called out and we feel that they should have an opportunity to respond. We will do that. We don't necessarily foresee that happening, but we will use our best judgment. Thank you all so much. Let's get started.
All right, for an opening statement, to introduce yourself to the audience and the viewers, please outline your relationship to the town and what about the Provincetown community inspires you to serve on the Select Board.
Eric, we'll begin with you.
Okay, thank you guys for organizing this, and thank you everybody for coming. My name is Eric Borg. For those of you who don't know me, some of you may know me as a part owner of Provincetown Brewing Company, and for those of you who are civically involved, which I imagine many of you are, I serve on the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Visitor Services Board. I first started coming here in 2010, and I really immediately was taken with it. In fact, actually before I even started coming here, I had read Michael Cunningham's book, Land's End, and I just really wanted to be a part of it. And so when I arrived, it was really more than I even imagined. It was the close-knit community made up of all these different factions of people kind of together, creating this sort of quirky, dynamic community. You know, the history combined with the natural beauty, all of it compressed into this one small place made me really fall in love with it. To the extent that after a couple of years coming here on the weekends, I moved here full time for a spell to write for the Banner. before the Provincetown Independent existed. um, and I bartended part-time at the Red Inn. And I did that for a couple of years, eventually moved to New York, but Provincetown had always remained my, sort of the place where my closest friendships coalesced. It was always a second home even when I was away. And so I moved back here in 2010 to open up 2019 to open up Provincetown Brewing Company with my friends, and it was really a dream come true. And so why am I being compelled to run? Well, my first year here, you know, I was sort of staring down the barrel of my first winter, and I felt like, for me, I need to get involved. So I started volunteering at the soup kitchen. I started serving on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Sorry.
That's your time. Thank you, Eric. Austin Knight.
Thank you. I was going to ask you to give me a nice reminder when I was hitting my point, but I see you have that. My name is Austin Knight, and I am currently running for Select Board. I have been a past Select Board member. Back a long time ago, we would select men, but now it's Select Board, and I have to remember that as I speak sometimes. But anyways, I'm running because I think there's a need for someone to run who has experience on the board already, and our critical issues of housing has become very clear that we need to have a direct conversation with the community and all the leaders in order to have that happen. I mean, when I look back, when I first got here in 2000, around 1997 actually, I came here, worked in the winter, came in 98, worked in the winter, and then moved here in 99. And it's totally changed in that short time, and because it's 2023. It's changed because the community has lessened as far as a lot of the people that were once here. Now, I remember going to the old VFW a long time ago. Mary P. Roderick, who was 102 years old, was my waitress at the time. And she waited on the tables for pancake breakfast, and she said, "Austin, what do you want? You want syrup or maple or molasses?" I said, "You know, what do you do?" She says, "Well, the West End has molasses and the East End has syrup." I said, "Well, I'm running for government. Give me a little of each." And she did, but Mary was my waitress, and you know, she had the cane in town for the longest time, and nobody wanted that cane because if you got the cane, you were next, and to pass it on, and you had to pass on to pass it on. So anyway, so I got here, and I started getting involved in the community. I was involved in the AIDS support group initially, and I was eventually president of that organization. There was a time when we were week to week on our budget in order just to make payroll. Now they're doing much better. We were able to get the AIDS memorial thanks to some of the selectmen that in the past to get that, because the war on AIDS was very real. This town stood up and took care of anybody that came here, and everybody was able to die with dignity.
Thank
I'm
you,
moving this along
Austin.
quickly because I only have 90 seconds. Is that it?
That was two
Oh
minutes.
my God, that was fast. Thank you.
Austin Miller.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to the Provincetown Independent and Wake Up in Provincetown for hosting this event today. We're blessed in our community to have such a robust local media who play an important role in keeping us informed and holding us all accountable to the truth behind each local story. So I want to thank you for creating that space here today. For those of you who I may not have yet had the chance to meet, my name's Austin Douglas Miller, and I'm running for Select Board because I believe that housing security is community security. Serving as the vice chair of both the Community Housing Council and the year-round Margaret Rental Housing Trust, I've seen firsthand what we can accomplish as a community when we come together around an important issue like housing. During my tenure, we've worked collaboratively with the Select Board to bring forward a litany of articles to town meeting in support of affordable and community housing, most importantly fulfilling on the town's commitment in support of developing 65 units of year-round affordable and community housing at the former VFW site. But there's more work to be done. We all hear and see the stories of people who are integral to our community facing housing insecurity. And just as our current housing shortage has hundreds of individual causes all coming together to create a crisis, so too must we come forward with a number of solutions to attack the problem from various angles. One such angle is through zoning reform, updating our bylaws to be more reflective of the values of today's voters in town who have nearly unanimously supported the creation of housing at town meeting and at the ballot box these past few years. Second, we need to work collaboratively with the town of Truro to address our collective water needs for the future. Our current agreements to access water resources, put into place less than 15 years ago, are already coming up against their limits faster than their framers had imagined at the time, which could lead us into an even larger housing crisis in less than a decade's time if unaddressed. We need to think more boldly and adaptively going forward, including exploring the potential creation of an independent water district to manage this critical joint resource between the towns.
Thank you, Austin.
All right.
And finally, Gordon Siegel.
Hi, good evening. I'm Gordon Siegel, and I want to also thank Wake Up in Provincetown, the Provincetown Independent, and the Crown and Anchor. And I also want to give a big thank you to the fire department for their great work last week. And thank you to all of you watching in here tonight. I started my relationship with Provincetown in 1984 at the age of 20. I just graduated college and was on my way to navigator training in the U.S. Air Force. I moved here full-time in 1996, and I've been part of the many changes ever since. When I arrived, we had a high school, and we didn't have a sewer. I'm inspired to serve because I love Provincetown, and I believe I can be an asset to the board and the town. I've navigated the town boards, and I understand the nuances and complexities about getting things done in Provincetown. One of the most important roles of the board is reviewing and adopting the annual budget. I have an accounting degree and have served real-world accounting experience. I served over 5 years on the town finance committee, and I am a successful business owner. I served as a volunteer and member of the board of directors of the Provincetown Aid Support Group, and I've been a realtor since 1997. A member of the PBG, I was the owner of 2 retail stores, a co-owner of a guest house, and a partner in the restaurant Big Daddy's Burritos. A landlord and a tenant and a volunteer, and yes, on this stage and others, as a drag performer. Over the years, I've been both a housing activist and a housing advocate. I'm a veteran and a team player, and I believe I possess the qualities needed for a member of the board. I work well with others, and I am an honest and effective leader. I have the knowledge of the town as well as the understanding that we are a diverse community, and we need to remain a diverse community. And hopefully tonight, you'll see that I have the courage and the vision to help make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Okay, let's move along to the questions that we've had prepared. Each candidate is going to have 90 seconds to respond to each question. Order will be random. Amelia, you have the first question.
Yeah, so perhaps unsurprisingly, our first question is on housing. Provincetown is doing more on housing than any other town on Cape Cod, including new apartments at the former VFW site, inclusionary zoning, and a new 4-story zone on Shankpainter, and yet we still have a worsening housing crisis. What projects or policies should the town leadership explore next to make this town more livable for everyone?
Austin Miller, we'll start with you.
Thank you for the question, and it's a really important one and a central part of my campaign and what I've been focused on with both the Community Housing Council and the Year-Round Trust the last couple of years. I think first and foremost, zoning reform to encourage more development of year-round housing, denser development for more affordable and community housing in the core of Provincetown is going to be critical. Creating an incentive structure around the creation of more year-round and workforce housing in addition to the structure that we currently have under our inclusionary zoning bylaw. And I also think that it'll be important for us to focus on finding the right solution that voters can coalesce around for the regulation of short-term rentals going forward.
Thank you. Gordon?
Sure. I'll start with what Austin said at the end. As far as the short-term rentals, I do believe that we need to have the housing workshop that the Board of Select have talked about having 2 a year, and I think we should do that this June. I don't think we should wait for the short-term rental report that's coming out in September. I think we need to sit down now and we need to have that dialogue, and we need to have not only the members like yourselves that were there that wanted the articles passed, but also realtors and banks and the people that are on both sides of the argument that can speak about it. As far as the housing crisis itself, we talk about a crisis, but we're not really, we're not all hands on deck, and I think we need to realize that we're not going to be able to solve all this, in my opinion, through town hall, through taxation, and even through government money. I think we really have to look to the philanthropic community that we have in front of us. I mean, when we have a high number of nonprofits in this town, and the amount of money that people like to give, we have a very generous community. And what happened in Truro last night was someone gave a house and they made that essential workforce housing for the EMTs. I think we can follow that business model. They've used it in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and they've used it in several other places where you get a campaign going, a fundraising campaign, a philanthropic campaign where people contribute, and that money is earmarked for housing for first responders, people like firemen, the EMTs, policemen, teachers, the critical jobs in this town that we need to fill and have
Thank you,
housing
Gordon.
for. Thank you.
Mr. Knight?
Thank you. This, the Ryan report came out in 2006 that identified housing as one of the critical needs of town. And since then, even though we've had one report after another, we've really stalled at times in order creating housing. And so it's time that the community, as well as the select board, as well as individuals privately and the banks get together and start to figure out how we can fund this. Because the holdup is always about funding. The project at VFW was held up because they're looking for state and federal funding to get it going. I negotiated that deal in 2013. We bought that property in 2013. It's now 2023. It still hasn't started. Though we've cleaned it up a little bit, you know, we could have used that for seasonal housing while it was still up there until we tore it down. So now we have to look to Route 6, other areas of property. Every time I look around this town, there's another development going in somewhere. Why isn't the town more actively pursuing some of those properties as we have in the past and try to make that something we need? I agree, the town cannot afford to do it all by itself. However, we must bring the second homeowners and the private industry into this in order to solve the problem so it doesn't bankrupt this town. My first meeting was with the Department of Revenue of the Commonwealth when we were about to go into receivership back in 2007. So I'm well aware of this the changes that we need to do financially in order to make this happen. We have to bring all the parties into the conversation to make this funding possible, to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Mr. Borg?
Yeah, this is a major issue that has a lot of factors that are contributing to it, and therefore it's going to take a multi-pronged approach to address it. I agree that all groups need to be at the table to make this work. First and foremost, we need to look at addressing our density. As far as dense as we are, we can be denser in certain areas, whether that's going up in scale, in height, or just general density. And I think when we're looking at that, we need to create parameters around how people are what developers are doing, how we can get developers to build the kind of housing that we actually need for affordable market rate and year-round seasonal workforce housing. When it comes to the short-term rental issue, I think corporate entities that are doing short-term rentals are out, right? They need to be out. We need to figure out exactly based on the plan that is coming in September, we need to be ready to act immediately based on what that's telling us, so that we can address this immediately.
Thank you, Mr. Borg. Okay, let's move along to our next question. Again on housing. As the town creates projects to provide housing, the discussion as to what type of housing should be built comes up. Affordable housing, middle-income housing, senior housing, seasonal dormitory housing, and dedicated housing for town staff are all possibilities. What is your priority for new housing projects? Eric Borg, this goes to you first.
Yeah, the discussion around housing, I think we talk about affordable housing a lot, and while it is very important, I think there's been more progress on that front than there has been when it comes to market rate and seasonal workforce housing. I think there are a lot of people in this town who make a decent income, who can't afford to buy property, who need housing stock as well. And so that's something that's falling through the cracks. I think that's something that new development can begin to focus on. And we're already, we have some really good projects for affordable housing and the barracks, and I think the market housing needs to be elevated to the forefront of that conversation.
Thank you, Eric. Austin Knight.
Thank you. I think the Patrick family has to be applauded at this time for their idea and their creation of housing for the town to help with the workforce housing and seasonal housing. They're a private family who's come forward with a plan that's going to work, that's going to help not only the businesses of town, but also our community to survive. When I say that, it's because if you don't have the workforce housing, your community is going to start to suffer. All your firemen and everything everyone's going to suffer if there's not enough housing. I think we need to look at the firehouse next door and the 2 parking lots, build over them for their dormitory housing that they want, build over that. And somebody said, well, what about the wetlands? Listen, if you can build the city of Boston in a harbor, you should be able to build some housing above the fire department. So we need to look actively with the partners that we already have and bring them into the conversation to make it happen. Provincetown has always solved its community problems when we work together, and that's the key, working together. And we can't leave out the second homeowners because, let's face it, the second homeowners pay 75% of the town of second homeowners. They pay 85% of the taxes. So no matter what we do, we have to bring them into the conversation to help us create the housing that's needed. Bring them as partners. Don't stop alienate. We need to bring all this group together again to have a clear conversation of where we want to go and to remain a community.
Thank you. Gordon Siegel.
Sure. Like I said before, I think it's staffing that's becoming an issue now for the town. And with the arrival of the fire department, or the impending arrival of paying the EMTs, and then, right around the corner is going to be the rest of the fire department, I believe that it's critical that we get our workforce housing, workforce housing for people that work for the town. Again, we need to have dedicated housing for police and fire and the teachers, medical personnel and town staff. I mean, those are the front line. And the town, as I've said to other people, I mean, we can run without one less restaurant. We can't run without one less fire department. And that's so I think that's number one. As far as employee housing for workers, I think a lot of the businesses have stepped up, and I see every day that they're buying multifamilies in town. And I think that the town could work better with them and help perhaps some of the smaller businesses through a co-op kind of situation and give them some guidance, and perhaps even create a vehicle whereas they can buy housing as well for their employees and go in that direction with that part of it.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Mr. Miller.
So I'm really glad you asked this question because this is a dilemma that I've thought a lot about the last couple of years. So on the Community Housing Council, we serve between 0 and 80% of area median income, which is approximately for a single person in Barnstable County about $90,000 a year in income. And then on the year-round Margaret Rental Housing Trust, we serve those between 80% and 200% AMI. And so what I've found in serving on those two trusts is that there is a need at all levels, but there is a huge difference in available funding sources and subsidies from state and federal partners between those two groups. And if you look at the VFW project, for example, that's primarily financed through state and federal subsidies with a $3 million commitment from the town of Provincetown to help develop the project of 65 units. Whereas you look at the Harbor Hill property that offers, I believe, 28 units, 55 people live there year-round, and the town has committed over $12 million thanks to the generosity of the town's voters, because there's simply not available state or federal funding sources to support that need, which is somewhat unique to Provincetown as a community, as a tourist-based economy. And so I think that while there is need at all levels, there's going to be a difference in the ability to subsidize based on available sources, and that's something that's important to look at. And then another note on
Thank you. Unfortunately, your time's up. Question number 3.
Yep. So the town tends to focus, or the town government tends to focus on town-sponsored construction projects. But I want to ask what else besides building you think the town should be working on. The Vail Deed Restriction Program, which is already underway, we passed some measures for that at town meeting, is one example of how to increase housing other than by building. Would you invest your time in zoning changes, deed restrictions, land acquisition, philanthropists, or some other strategy?
Austin Knight, we'll begin with you.
Can we say all of the above? Because it really is all of the above. You can't just single out one thing and say we need to concentrate. It is a package. And so if we look, let's look at the deed restrictions. A few years ago, both Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New England states as such had deed restrictions to purchase of land from agriculture in order to preserve it. It worked a very well program and it kept it going. We need to do the same thing with housing stock and property. If we're going to have deed restrictions, if we voted to buy deed restrictions, where's the resource? Who's going to pay for it? You know, we got to come up with a market value toward that deed restriction. If I'm getting a deed restriction, and I can sell it, and I understand there are good-hearted people that would be willing to step forward and sell that deed restriction, but the reality is a lot of these people are retiring and need their money for the future. We need to come up with a clear plan of how we're going to fund it. Now, two ways that fund it. We can now look at those units who are seasonal or weekly rental or monthly rental and go after all the ones who aren't paying that tax. I believe we're probably 40 to 50% of those properties aren't paying the tax, which could be anywhere from $500,000 to $750,000 a year more going toward that fund. We need to look at that fund over time, build up capital, and go after long-term bonding along with the state. The Commonwealth also has to be part of this conversation where we can go into long-term bonding so it doesn't bankrupt the towns and we can have match funding. So we have to work with our legislators also.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Austin Miller.
So this was actually going to be what I finished my last question with, which is I think one thing that we should explore is creating a local version of the Department of Housing and Urban Development's Good Neighbor Next Door program, which supports housing for critical emergency services personnel by providing essentially a down payment type subsidy. So we could turn that into a buy down program similar to what the town of Wellfleet offers and create deed restricted housing units that are dedicated to our emergency staff. I think by far the most powerful thing that we could do as a town that costs the voters nothing is zoning reform. So focusing on adapting our zoning rules to incentivize and encourage the development of the types of housing units that we need most critically in town, year-round, affordable and community and workforce housing. And then I think the last option of last resort, if you will, because of the expense and process that's involved in it, is the actual acquisition and or management of property. I mean, we're subject to a number of rules and regulations as a municipal entity that make things a lot more expensive and difficult for us when we actually take on ownership of properties for the purpose of housing. And so it's something that we can do and certainly should explore in some instances, but is one that can be very expensive in comparison to other options.
Thank you, Austin Miller. Eric Borg.
Yeah, I think the deed restriction purchase program is a really promising program in concept. I would like to explore how we could amend it so that we're ensuring that people actually participate in it. Having people, sell a deed for their property to make sure that it's occupied year-round by a local resident is a really good thing. But allowing them to eventually, after maybe 20 years or so, buy that back and still participate in the appreciating value of their home, so that we're solving the problem now. We're getting people in houses now, but allowing the person who's doing that to, eventually at a certain point when that problem is solved, still protect the interest in the property of their home, I think might significantly increase the amount of people who are actually going to participate in that program. When it comes to our zoning bylaws, increasing density, but doing it smartly so that developers who are allowed to go up a fourth floor in certain areas of town or to create more density in that way, we can obligate them to build housing that is dedicated to the people who need it most. So that's people who work at town hall, people who serve in the fire department, and create specific parameters that the new development that is happening is actually benefiting the very people that we need in those homes.
Thank you, Mr. Borg. Gordon Siegel.
Sure. So I would echo most of what everybody previously said regarding the deed restrictions. I would just, and I also, of course, like the idea that we get the community involved through a philanthropic way, perhaps even donating a piece of land or selling at a reduced rate to the town, like the VFW property was sold to the town at a reduced rate with the intent that it was going to be used by the town. And I think that's an avenue that we should be exploring. My one concern when we talk about developers and we change the zoning and we change the restrictions is the thing called a loophole. And everybody that spends a lot of time here always seems to find that. And then we wind up on the losing side somehow when we thought we were getting some units and we don't get those units. So I think if we're going to go the route that we're going to change our zoning regs, we need to look really clearly at that and see what the ramifications are going to be. I, for one, think it's a slippery slope when you say we're going to go 4 stories at Champaigner Road, and then we're going to go 4 stories on Commercial Street. We're going to go 4 stories. You know, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see the makeup personally of Provincetown change to that extreme, where we start just allowing building just for the sake that I know we need housing, but I think there's other ways we can accomplish that without just giving up what we're basically known for, and that's our community and the style of community that our historical commission has strived so long to maintain.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Amelia with the next question.
At the most recent town meeting, by far the most contentious articles were centered around the regulation and limitation of short-term rentals in Provincetown. What is your opinion of the role of short-term rentals and their effect on housing in town? And what do you think are the next steps that town leadership should take to continue the discussion?
Gordon Siegel, we'll start with you.
That's a great question. Well, when I first got here and I was a realtor, we had a book in our office that had rentals in it. And they were the weekly rentals. It was before the computer, before internet, whatever. Anyway, and so we would go and we would call an office if someone had called and said, hey, I want to have this week, and you call other offices that may have had that rental and see if they had it. And then that's basically how the weekly rentals. And those rentals were owned by people that, some of which are probably sitting in this audience today. There are people that came to Provincetown and bought a house or bought a condo, but they couldn't afford or they couldn't use it all the time, and so they rented it a week or two. And that's kind of how our short-term rentals started. They didn't start where a bunch of people came to town and bought a bunch of property thinking they were going to make a lot of money renting them weekly. I mean, I think that some people have that impression, but if you go to the assessor and ask, there are no corporations here that have bought single families or condos with the only intent of renting them weekly. That's what I've been told by the assessor. So I think it's a little bit of a misnomer. As far as what happened at town meeting, like I said, first day, I think you need to call a meeting. We need to have that meeting now. We need to have a housing workshop now. 2L in the Board of Selectmen's goals for this year is have 2 housing workshops per year. It's May, we still haven't had one. I think we need to get all those people in the room and start talking and having a dialogue and see, okay, how do we do this? How do we get a wraparound on these short-term rentals if we need to and curtail them?
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Austin Miller.
So I think that short-term rentals play a really important role in supporting our tourist economy here in Provincetown. And you know, one that supplements availability of units for tourists to stay that helps to encourage socioeconomic diversity of our tourists, because obviously it's a supply and demand issue, where if there's a lot greater demand than there is supply, then only the most wealthy can be able to afford to come here. And this is a community that we all love and we all experienced you know, throughout our lives in prior years and you know, became attached to. And so I do think there's a place for reasonable short-term rental regulation, and it's one that's really important for us to quantify where that cap should be. I, for one, would like to see it tied to number of housing units in some way, and I think the data that we'll be getting later this year will be really helpful to define a cap that's not just arbitrary but based on that data, and also should have exemptions for people who are able to claim residential exemptions on their property taxes, including because they live there year-round, or if they are renting a portion of that property out to a year-round tenant that they can subsidize through short-term rental.
Thank you, Austin Miller. Eric Borg?
Yeah, I think it's one part of a larger problem. So doing away with short-term rentals altogether, I don't think would solve the housing crisis whatsoever. That being said, I think it's clear that we are far behind in implementing some sort of responsible regulation around it. So the question is, what is that regulation? I would like to explore the possibility of a system where we have a high cap or even no cap on the limits of Airbnbs and short-term rentals, but we are creating a system where we are requiring someone to not only apply for it every year, not only pay a significant amount for it every year, but somewhat counterintuitively actually use it at the quota at which they purchased it every year. Because I think that might do a couple things. It might actually incentivize people to rent out their place for less, which would create opportunities for younger and more diverse people to come here on vacation and fall in love with the town and contribute to the town. And then the whole rigmarole of doing that every year, the applying for it, the paying for it, the having to use it, and the potential of suffering a penalty if you don't use it, I think might actually make people think long and hard about whether it's easier for them to rent it to someone year round. And then when they do, their accessory dwelling unit, we're giving them tax incentives to do so.
Austin Knight?
First of all, we have to have a clear understanding exactly where we are with the short-term rentals. How many I mean, we can estimate and say basically we know someone who's been affected by this, but what is the exact number? That exact number also shows the amount of income this town is either losing or gaining from it. We need to take the resources from that income and put it directly toward housing, especially the difference between what we're collecting now and what we could collect. We need to start to organize that and capitalize on that and use it for our goal, which is to create housing. Stopping short-term rentals is not going to give you the housing you need as a community. We need to identify properties and locations where we can develop these properties and create housing that'll be long-standing in perpetuity rather than a quick solution, quick fix, go after the neighbor next door. We got to stop that all. We got to stop going after each other and work together again. And that's what the problem I have with 1819. It was pitting one group against another, and there was, when you deal with emotions like that, you're not going to get solutions. You have to have a solution by bringing everybody in that conversation, even the ones that were opposed to it, bring everybody into the same room and have a direct conversation to develop a plan which will work for our community. And I appreciate those communities around the country that are doing it. We can utilize what they've done and adapt it to our own needs.
Thank you, Austin Knight. Paul with our next question.
All right, we're moving on, or attempting, to issues other than housing. So many things do connect back to our housing problem. As the town works toward a sustainable and livable future for everybody here, there are plenty of other challenges in our way. Can you identify one or two specific community challenges that you want to work on during your select board term? Essentially, what else is in your platform?
Eric Borg?
Yeah, climate change is something that I think that we are all are all facing and will continue to face. And I think there are predicted effects of climate change and then unforeseen ones that are happening. We need to create so for example, someone raises their house and they protect their home that way, and that's required if there's a certain level of redevelopment. But then there's the unforeseen consequence of that, which is the water runoff is running into the town and flooding other parts of the town, and we need a system to address that. Right now, there is no system for that. It's sort of it's unclear who's even responsible for that, whether it's the town, whether it's the individual property owner, whether it's the Army Corps of Engineers, who's paying to address that. And so as a town body, we need to create a structure where we're pulling in local, state, federal, individual property owners, and providing a pathway for them to address it and providing them funding for them to address it. Because right now it's a gray area that it's only going to get worse.
Thank you, Eric. Gordon Siegel?
I would have to agree with Eric wholeheartedly. Climate change is definitely number two, right after housing. And just what he said, I think we have a climate resiliency committee right now, and I believe that we should make that into a board because they're not going away. And is that it really?
No, sorry.
And they're not going anywhere, and either is climate change. I mean, so I think that the sooner we all ramp that up and realize it's right below housing as being a critical issue to the town, that I think that's really the next thing. Beyond that, I just think really focusing on how we can welcome people and continue the diversity that we have. I mean, you know, we've kind of, a few years ago we had 3 women running for the Board of Select, and now we have 4 men running for the Board of Select. And, you know, you see the diversity. You want to keep Provincetown as diverse as possible, and I think that anything we can do through affordable housing and market rate housing and all those other things we talked about, but we need to keep an eye on who we are as a people.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Austin Knight.
Thank you. All you have to do is live in the West End in February a few years ago, or you have to live in the center of town just a couple of years ago, or you have to live in the East End this past year to understand what flooding is caused by climate change. And the solution is not going to be easy. You know, the Independent wrote a little bit of what I said about some sort of a barrier. I mean, the sand that's behind the Hilliard Gallery is nice, but if anybody goes to Race Point, realizes what the ocean is doing to sand. So we have to come up with a better plan. I think raising the houses as construction is needed is important, but also there may be those property owners along the town who cannot afford raising their house at this point. We have to come up with some way to give them assistance, whether it be a long-term loan or something like to raise those houses to try to protect them. But the bottom line is the water's coming. It's already surrounded us 3 times, 3 different years. I remember when the Provincetown Inn was sold and they were going to go to closing, and we had that flood in the West End, and it ended. So it's going to affect us economically. Our whole commercial street is in the floodplain. Just look at the Cape Cod Commission report on that, and you'll see how much danger this town is in, and we have to be more aggressive. I heard this conversation 14 years ago about how we have to start addressing. The time is now. It's not going to change. We need to do it now.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Austin Miller.
All right, I'll keep it very straightforward and simple. Coastal resiliency and climate change, access to safe drinking water resources into the future, and diversity, equity, and inclusion in not only our governance and our year-round population, but our visitors as well.
Thank you. Paul?
So access to healthcare is a problem on the Outer Cape, particularly when it comes to mental health, substance abuse, and youth and elder healthcare. Do you think the Select Board can do anything to make this problem better?
Gordon Siegel, we'll start with you.
Most definitely. I think the Select Board sets the tone of the town to a large extent, and I think when you have a seat at the table and you're concerned about it, this year the mental health is number 11 on the list of the Board of Selectmen's goals. It's also climate change is number 10, by the way. So I would move both of those up along as a priority, and I think if the board focuses more on it, so will the town.
Thank you, Gordon. Austin Knight.
Thank you again for the question. When I hate to, I'm the only one that's been on the board before, so I can say this, I guess. But when we were on the board before, Outer Cape used to come before us. And we used to have a meeting with Outer Cape Health Services. And a long time ago, I kept saying, all we ever do is go to Hyannis Hospital. You need stitch, you go to Hyannis Hospital. You have an X-ray, you had to go to Hyannis Hospital. So we had the discussion with Outer Cape in order to bring those services here, along with our congressmen and others, and they were to build out those services Outer Cape. Now you can stitch your finger at Outer Cape. Then you can get your X-rays at Outer Cape. And the Board of Selectmen are the ones who brought the parties in to have the discussion to expand the services. This town is good for 2 things. One, it's a great town to entertain yourself with and have a great time. The epidemic of drugs and drinking is excessive, but it also has a very strong, sober community, too. And we as the Board of Selectmen can start to lead the policies to start to address some of those crises, and they are a crisis. If anybody doesn't know something, my brother died of a heroin overdose in 2014. I'm very well aware of the crisis that happens to the family as well as, friends. From that, we need to look at this directly, and the Board of Selectmen has a clear place in this conversation, and they have a direct stance. It has to go from 10 to, after housing, 2 or 3.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Austin Miller?
Yeah, I think the right answer here is to work really closely with our partners at Outer Cape and elsewhere to try to bring more mental health care services and access to those services into town. I think we've been blessed in some ways in this environment over the past few years to be able to access some of those services remotely for many individuals more than they had in the past. But it's also important to make them available right here in this community. So again, I think it's important to identify opportunities for grants and outside funding sources and maybe even subsidies or additional incentives that we can offer from the town to be able to encourage the expansion of those services.
Thank you. Eric Borg?
Yeah, I believe it's a problem and a gap in our community when you have to go to the police if someone's having a mental health crisis or represents a potential danger to themselves or a danger to other people in the community due to a mental health crisis or perhaps a drug response. I think it's a gap, and I think as it currently stands, there are situations where the police alone are not the correct response, and Outer Cape Health is not the correct response. And I think it would be worthy to get everyone together and create a dedicated role for our community where we have some sort of health and human services representative who can make calls, who can respond to calls in a way that isn't a police response. I think there is some sort of service from Barnstable County, but that's it's an hour away, and I think that we need that right here in Provincetown.
Thank you, Mr. Borg. Amelia with the next question.
Yeah, so this was already brought up a bit, but we do want to talk about coastal resiliency and knowing that Provincetown has seen major saltwater flooding twice in the last 5 years. Concretely, how should the town be planning and preparing now to protect its low-lying coastal areas?
Austin Knight?
We have to work with our partners at the Cape Cod Commission who have the professional staff there that can help us develop the plans and bring it forward to us. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are enough resources that are available to us to bring in solutions. We need to do this now. We can't wait any longer. And I don't want to correct one of the people, but I believe there were 3 instances that included the center of town, West End, and the East End in the last 5 years. So it's surrounding us, and it's something we need to do now. But bring our partners in. Cape Cod Commission is incredible for the amount of work that they've done through the community, and they've worked out to the community to reach out for the roads. I don't understand why Provincetown wasn't on that walk-around tour that they did with Truro and some of their other surrounding towns about the flooding of the roads.
Thank you. Eric Borg?
Yeah. So what do we want to do? We want to protect. We want to protect our town. We want to protect our marshlands. We also want to do things that protect them while also preserving our burgeoning aquaculture community. And we have a study coming, a coastal resiliency study coming, and the science is going to tell us exactly how we can do all of those at once. And I think we just need to follow that study and come up with, follow that study so that we're protecting all things that we need to protect. And I think it's possible. I think it's possible.
Thank you, Mr. Borg. Gordon Siegel?
Sure. I think the Harbor Committee has a 10-year plan that they're 5 years into, and I think the community engagement that's going on is definitely one of the keys here because I don't profess to have all the answers to how to fix the coastline, but I know that there's people out there that do, and by bringing those people together is really going to be part of the solution. That the meeting that I was at a couple of weeks ago, there was a lot of good ideas discussed, and again, I think we have some money on it and we have some studies going on it, and as those things progress, we need to take the what the study says we need to do and perhaps implement those things. But we're definitely going to have to focus on it a little more with a little more money and a little more time.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Austin Miller?
So I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in coastal resiliency, but as a select board member, I would be committed to working closely with the experts to identify opportunities for the town to support additional efforts on coastal resiliency. But what I will add from a regulatory perspective is that, you know, when there is damage from an event like flooding that's happened in Provincetown in the past, insurers will pay to rebuild those properties or fix those properties back exactly to code. And so if we ensure that our codes and our bylaws are properly set up to address how we expect our coast and how we expect our environment to be years into the future with climate change, then I think that we will over time start to address that problem or any deficiencies that could lead to losses in the future.
Thank you, Austin Miller. I have the next question. Provincetown has served as a refuge for gay people, trans people, and people seeking acceptance for generations. Currently, drag performers and the trans community are under attack nationwide. How can the town and the select board respond? Austin Miller, we'll start with you.
Yeah, this is a really difficult problem, and one that I feel very fortunate that we live in a community where our community leaders and our state leadership at all levels, both federally, our federal state representatives and our direct representatives are all very supportive of the queer community here in Provincetown. And I think we can continue to be clear and unwavering in our support and serve as a refuge for people who feel like they're unable to continue to live in those areas. And I think addressing our housing problem, becoming a place where you know, people who are able to join the community and be a part of our workforce and critical parts of this community are able to come and live here in a way that's not completely unaffordable and unattainable is going to be a big way for us to continue to support that in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Eric Borg?
Well, it's clear that Provincetown historically, has an international reputation as a queer haven, as a place of creative expression, and I think that we have an opportunity in the face of what's happening nationally to lead with that in the way that we market this town. I think that we have an opportunity to be seen as an outspoken voice, and to market the town so that people follow Provincetown's lead as a place where we are a haven for creative queer expression, for individualism, and I think if we market the town in this way to younger and more diverse people, and we attract people to Provincetown through our marketing, I think they'll come.
Thank you, Mr. Borg. Austin Knight?
Provincetown has always been a leader in the country in all the areas when it comes to being gay or queer or whatever, however we want to say it. All I have to do is look during the AIDS crisis when so many gay men came here to die with dignity. We have a memorial out in front of Town Hall that symbolized that our community has always been open and responsive to the rest of the world, not just our state, not just Florida, not just California. The world we have been the leader to. And we have to maintain that. And the Board of Selectmen a few years ago had to stand up when some of the businesses were not so happy with Family Week. Let me tell you, Family Week's our future. Those kids are being raised in an environment that shows absolute unconditional love with their parents. We need to spread that word around more to these crazy states who just want to say no to everything, and we say, not here, not here. You can come here, you can be yourself, you can entertain the way you want to entertain, and we have that door open, and we must keep it open. And the Board of Selectmen throughout the years have done that. We have to applaud ourselves for one of the credits that we do very well. and let the world know that we're not closing our doors. Our doors are open for anybody that wants to come here and participate and be inclusive and loving.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Gordon Siegel?
Sure, I think the best way we could do is put our money where our mouth is, and the Board of Selectmen should be in drag for Carnival Parade.
I love that idea. Paul, with our next question.
So values are important, and that's why a lot of these questions have been about policies and values and what you want to work on. But it's also important to be able to translate your values into action. What makes each of you think you will be effective on the select board in getting the many things confronting this town accomplished?
Austin Knight?
Well, I can say I've done it already. Met with the DOR, got us off the watchdog list with the teamwork of the Provincetown Board of Selectmen and the town manager, got us off the watchdog list, got us out of the state of almost receivership. When Town Hall was condemned, we got that project done. We got it so it's a pride and joy of the middle of the town again. When it came down to paving down Commercial Street, we had to shut down all the businesses for a bit of time in order to get that impervious pavement in there. It's a done project. When we wanted to buy VFW, we brought it forward to the town. We got it done. Now we got to get the housing done. That's a big thing. I have a track record as a Board of Selectmen member to get projects done on time, on budget, and with the participation of the community. That's why I'm running for Board of Selectmen, because I've done it in the past and I can do it again. Thank you.
Thank you. Austin Miller?
Look, you may have been able to tell I'm not the most natural public speaker because I've spent most of or all of my career over the past decade plus as a regulatory compliance officer behind the scenes in financial services, focusing on protecting the interests of consumers when they get mortgages, credit cards, other loans from their banking institutions, and translating the values of consumer protection into real on-the-ground action. And over the past couple of years on the Community Housing Council and on the year-round Margaret Rental Housing Trust, I have turned those skills and expertise into translating values into action on housing in Provincetown, and that's exactly what I would do on the select board.
Thank you. Gordon Siegel?
Could you repeat the question?
Values and policies are important, which is why we've been talking about them, but you need to be able to translate those values into action. What makes you think you would be able to effectively serve on the select board and get the things the town needs done accomplished?
I just think my track record as what I spoke about at the beginning, the things that I've done in this town. I also think having an understanding that we are a diverse community. We've changed of who we are, as Austin has said, over the years. And being a part of that community and understanding those different facets, I think I can be a part of the discussion and sit at the table and help make those decisions, understanding that there's a lot of moving parts to the situation and a lot of different people here that are doing it. I just think that I have done a lot of things over the years that lend itself well to the situation.
Thank you, Gordon. Eric Borg?
Yeah, I'm not a politician, and I'm definitely not a public speaker. So as I was weighing my candidacy and whether I should throw my hat into the ring, and I finally decided to do so. It was because if there's one thing I know that I have integrity. I will work diligently to do the best thing for the most people, and I think I can lean on an ability to work collaboratively, to listen, to be to build a consensus. I think I have that ability, and I don't have a naysayer's attitude. I think the possibilities and the solutions to take this town forward are out there, and I will go after them.
Thank you, Mr. Borg. I have the next question. As a small community, discourse around town issues happens anywhere and everywhere. Facebook, the post office, Stop and Shop. How do you plan to make yourself available to community members to make their voices heard while also creating boundaries for yourself to preserve your own space? Austin Miller, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's an important question. I mean, the conversations that you have anywhere in town are can be really valuable. And when someone flags you down and says, hey, I want to tell you about this thing, or let's talk about this, quickly, that's great. But it's also not an opportunity to get deeply into something and get into the weeds of discussion. And so I think having some type of forum or regular kind of feedback session, say like a town hall, would be an important kind of feedback process with voters in town, because the one thing that I would certainly hope to avoid as a select board member, and not that I'm suggesting that this is true of anyone else in particular, is that you tend to, I think this is true in general of all of us in this day and age, is you tend to experience somewhat of an echo chamber, and people around you are very similar to you. And I think it's important to push yourself to go outside of that circle and push yourself to hear from people that you wouldn't normally hear from. And so I would constantly be looking for ways to do that.
Thank you. Austin Knight.
I think it was a great idea, and I applaud it about having regular sessions at Town Hall. When you're a selectman 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 or 366 days a year. There's no time off. Now, when I would be with friends, when we would go to the market together, they knew that as a select person, going to the market for me wasn't a 5-minute ordeal. It was going to be anywhere from 20 minutes to a half hour, sometimes longer. Now, there are times when you have to tell people, look, I've got something I got to do. Give them your number and say, call me back. I've never been a Facebook guy, and I'm not going to tell you I am now, because I'm not. We're starting to do a couple little Facebook things. I'm 65 years old, okay? That's what I am. But I've always been available. My number, my email, everything's always been available. I've always been available at Town Hall. Give me a call, email me, even text me, and we'll get together. I believe the one-on-one, looking you eye to eye, person to person, is the best way to have a conversation, rather than sometimes on the internet where you really don't know what the hell's going on other than a conversation. I like one-on-one or groups, because I find that's where you really get the spirit of whatever the conversation has to be.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Eric Borg.
Yeah, I would welcome dedicated times for group discussions. When it comes to one-on-ones, nor am I a Facebook guy. I think it's a platform that oftentimes does not bring the best out in us, and so, I got rid of that 3 years ago, and I don't plan on going back. I'm also all over this town. I'm at the brewery. I'm making deliveries to many of the local businesses in town. I'm up and down these streets, and I think I communicate best one-on-one. So I would lean on being readily available throughout town, and through phone calls and group discussions.
Thank you, Eric. Gordon Siegel.
I definitely think community engagement is number one. Again, I echo, I'm not really a big social media fan. I saw when the last town manager tried to hold court on Facebook, it didn't go very well. So I just think in general, community engagement, I have 2 dogs and I walk them quite a bit, and I'm around the neighborhoods and I see a lot of people, and that's, I think the best way is really, I think as a select person, a member of the select board, you could have a weekly coffee and something like that, and make yourself available like professors used to do in college. They had office hours similar to that, where you're just around and say, hey, if you want to, if that works. And then of course give them your phone number. We all, anybody can text me, and go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. That is all the questions we have for this evening. Do you want to intro the?
Yeah, so thank you all for being with us tonight. And we'd like to give you each an opportunity for a 2-minute closing statement.
We're going to go the opposite direction than when we started, so we'll start with you, Mr. Siegel.
All right, so again, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and I want to thank the sponsors of the program and also the other 3 candidates that are running. In closing, I'd reiterate that I'm an honest and an intelligent and a hardworking veteran, and I have a willingness to serve our community. I think my life experiences have shown that I can work well with others and get the job done. I consider myself a feminist, environmentalist, and a champion of equal and human rights. And I also believe that at town meeting we saw that consensus takes time and dialogue and often compromise. We went from having a school and not having a sewer to today, and it took us 50 years to get the sewer the first time. So I think we live in one of the most beautiful places on earth with an unparalleled level of cultural acceptance, and I understand Provincetown has many issues that we face today, and I'm ready to join the board and add my voice to the conversation, and I ask for your vote on May 9th.
Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Mr. Miller?
So for me, housing security is community security. My platform is zoning reform, access to sustainable water resources, and support of the build out of our EMS and emergency services. And I'm asking for your vote on May 9th. Austin Douglas Miller. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Knight?
Thank you for this, and first of all, thank everyone for coming this evening. Thank those who are also online. Thank those who sponsored us here this evening. I just got a couple things. I brought these little props, if we'll say. In 2021, I almost died. I had a major heart issue, and I was in the hospital for a bit of time, and it all worked out pretty well. They did a couple bypasses, and here I am today with more vigor than I've had in a long, long time. But when I got home, I had a package, and in the package was these cards. And it says, "Hi, Austin. I heard you were sick. I hope you feel better. I know you have been a great help to Provincetown schools. Get well soon, Mr. Knight." And this was from Tyler, and he was from the school. And I got one more I want to read, if possible, if I hold the mic up here. And this is why I'm running, because these are our community. These are the kids at the school. And this last one I'll read you, if I can. It says, "Dear Mr. Knight, thank for your contributions and all you've done for our school and our community. Please get well soon. We really miss you, and you are an amazing person." And that was from Haley Jackson, the National Junior Honor Society member. And I have one more from one of the kids there that says, "Sending you good vibes, Mr. Knight." So I'm running for selectman for these kids, for the community as a whole, and for those people who still want to come here and those who want to stay here. That's why I'm running for selectman, because I believe passionately in this town. I've been coming here since I was 13 years old. I'm 65. Do the math. I've lived here for 25 years. I've been a past select person. I've been a past member of the AIDS support group. I've been involved in the Swim for Life for many, many years. I am invested in this community, and I continue to be invested in this community. And I ask for your support on May 9th, and thank you for coming. And housing is our #1 issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Mr. Borg?
Yeah, I love this town, and what I really love about it is that in this community, everybody cares so much. Even what we saw at Town Hall, even when it's contentious, it's because everybody here cares, and everybody here has an opportunity to. We found this place where we can be heard, where we can be part of the solutions, where we can contribute our talents and gifts, and they can be felt in this town. It's a special place, and I think there's a reason that we're all here. I want to be a voice for that. I want to work with all of these people who care so much, all of you who came out tonight, and find solutions to some of these they seem dire, but the fact that we all care, the fact that we are so invested in this community, it really gives me a lot of confidence that we can carry Provincetown into a new era, into the future, and make it a really dynamic and continue a dynamic place to live year round.
Thank you, Mr. Borg. That wraps up our forum this evening. I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. I want to thank our candidates for being so generous with their time and allowing them getting up here and speaking in front of everyone. I know it's not the easiest thing sometimes. I want to thank my fellow moderators and the Crown and Anchor. Early voting is open now. Voting day is May 9th. You can vote early voting during the week through the 5th, and I hope you all can make it there. Thank you so much for coming out this evening.